Hello, Faves Nation. It's your guy, Fave, and I've got some genuinely great news for this Chicago Bears offensive line that I think a lot of people slept on over the holiday weekend. Because Ozzy Trapalo, the guy who is supposed to be Chicago's long-term answer at left tackle before a brutal injury derailed everything, is looking like he might be coming back a whole lot sooner than anybody expected. And that's not the only good news either, because there's a whole lot happening up front with this offensive line right now that Bears fans need to know about heading into training camp. Let's start with the big one, because this is the story that's got everybody buzzing. Ozzy Trapalo has been spotted back at the facility doing strength and conditioning work, and from everything coming out of that footage, he looks genuinely good. Now let's rewind for a second so you understand exactly why this matters so much. Trapalo was Chicago's second-round pick back in the 2025 draft out of Boston College, and even though he played the majority of his college career at right tackle, the Bears had a plan to convert him to the left side, the blind side, the most premium real estate on an offensive line. It took a while for that plan to actually come together. Braxton Jones opened the season as the starter, got benched, Theo Benedette stepped in for a stretch, and it wasn't until deep into the season that Trapalo finally got his opportunity, and once he got that shot, he ran with it. He held his own against genuinely elite competition too. His first real test at left tackle came against the Pittsburgh Steelers front, and he more than survived it. He also squared off against Max Crosby earlier in the year, and again, held his own against one of the most disruptive edge rushers in this entire league. Fave's personal opinion, that is not a small accomplishment for a rookie making a positional switch on the fly in the middle of an NFL season. That's a young player showing real, legitimate growth against real competition, not just padding stats against backups. And then, right when things were clicking, right when Chicago finally felt like they had stability at that position after a full season of rotating bodies, disaster struck. Trapalo suffered a torn patellar tendon during the Bears' wildcard playoff win over the Green Bay Packers, an injury that immediately raised concerns he could miss a significant chunk, maybe even the majority, of this upcoming 2026 season. Patellar tendon injuries are no joke either. They're actually considered more unpredictable in some ways than a torn ankle, because the recovery timeline can vary so much from player to player, and there was real uncertainty about how his surgery and rehab would progress. But here's where the good news comes in, and this is genuinely encouraging if you're a Bears fan. Recent footage has shown Trapalo back at strength training, and the biggest detail jumping out to people who know this stuff, there's no knee brace on him at all. That is a legitimately great sign. When a player is still dealing with structural concerns or lingering instability, you almost always see some kind of brace or protective sleeve during this stage of recovery. The absence of one suggests his knee is stabilizing well and he's progressing ahead of a conservative timeline. Fave's personal opinion, and I know some fans want to pump the brakes on getting too excited off of one training clip, but you have to remember what this guy is working with physically in the first place. Trapalo is 6'8", over 312 pounds. And even accounting for all that size, he's looking leaner, more toned, and stronger through this recovery process than you'd expect this early. That's not just a good sign for his knee, that's a good sign for his overall conditioning heading into a season where he desperately wants to prove last year wasn't a fluke. There's also been some fun anecdotal stuff floating around too. One fan out on the East Coast claims to have spotted Trapalo out and about in the Boston area and said he even did a squat at a bar just to show off how far along his recovery actually is. Now look, that's obviously more of a fun, lighthearted detail than hard reporting, but it fits the overall pattern we're seeing. A guy who is clearly locked in and motivated to get back on the field as fast as safely possible. If Trapalo can beat the more pessimistic recovery timelines and get back onto the field by the middle of the season, that would be an enormous boost for this offensive line, because right now the left tackle picture in Chicago is still genuinely murky. Braxton Jones is currently the presumed starter heading into camp, but Fave's personal opinion, I don't think that job is fully his to lose if Trapalo shows out in camp reps once he's cleared. Jones is a good physical run blocker. There's no denying that part of his game. But the bull rush has been an issue for him at times. And if you put me on the spot and ask who my QB1 at left tackle would be if Trapalo were fully healthy right now, I'm taking Trapalo. No hesitation. Ben Johnson has been consistent about this all along too, saying repeatedly that he's going to play whichever guy gives his team the best chance to win the game, period, regardless of draft status or incumbency. That competition is healthy for both players, and it should push Braxton Jones to work even harder this summer, especially knowing he's got real motivation of his own. Jones signed a contract worth around $10 million with incentives to stay in Chicago, and if he wants to actually earn all of that money and continue his NFL career at a high level, he knows he's got to bring his best football this training camp, competition or not. Now let's talk about the other half of this offensive line story, because it's not just about Trapalo's recovery. There's real, tangible momentum building across this entire unit heading into camp. A photo circulated recently showing several young Bears offensive linemen, Darnell Wright, Kieran Amagaji, and Theo Benedette, all putting in work together this offseason with a very special mentor in their corner, 5-time Pro Bowl left tackle Terron Armstead. And this connection is not some random coincidence either. Fave's personal opinion, this is a direct byproduct of smart organizational planning by this coaching staff. Armstead built his Hall of Fame caliber career under offensive line coach Dan Rochar back when Rochar was running the show up front for the New Orleans Saints. Rochar has been completely open about how much respect he has for Armstead's game, going as far as calling him the standard by which he measures elite offensive line play. So when your own position coach has that kind of relationship and that kind of respect for one of the best pure technicians to ever play the position, of course you're going to funnel your young lineman down to learn directly from him. It's an incredible resource that a lot of teams simply don't have access to, and the Bears are taking full advantage of it. Let's start with Darnell Wright, because this guy is looking like the clear cornerstone of this offensive line heading into the future. Wright is coming off a second-team All-Pro season, which is an enormous accomplishment for a young right tackle still developing in this league. The Bears have already exercised his fifth-year option too, which tells you everything you need to know about how the front office views him. That's a signal of long-term commitment, and it also happens to be great value because it locks him in on a relatively team-friendly number while he's still just 24 years old. In the recent training photos, Wright is looking noticeably leaner and more athletic while still carrying the mass you need at that position, somewhere in that 6'5", 320-plus pound range, depending on which measurement you go with. Fave's personal opinion, that's exactly the profile Ben Johnson and this front office have prioritized across the entire roster. Guys who combine legitimate size with real functional athleticism instead of just being big bodies clogging up space. Then you've got Kieran Amagaji, the former third-round pick, who's genuinely had a tough go of it early in his career. This is a young player who a lot of outside voices had already started writing off after a frustrating sophomore season. But the fact that he's out there putting in extra work with a mentor like Armstead this offseason tells you he hasn't given up on turning his career around. Fave's personal opinion, that's exactly the kind of mentality you want to see from a young player who's dealt with some rough patches. It would be easy for a guy in his position to just go through the motions heading into a contract year type of situation, but instead he's seeking out one of the best to ever do it and putting in the extra reps. That's a real positive sign, even if the results on the field still need to show up this coming season. And then there's Theo Benedette, who's quietly become one of the more versatile, dependable pieces on this offensive line. Benedette started a significant chunk of games last season when Trapalo went down and Jones dealt with his own issues, and by every account, he held his own in that starting role. Seeing him show up in these same training sessions looking noticeably bigger and stronger adds another layer of quality depth to a group that desperately needed reinforcements up front just a couple years ago. Here's the bigger picture, Fave's personal opinion to wrap this whole thing together. 2 years ago, the offensive line was one of the clearest, most obvious weaknesses on this entire Chicago Bears roster. Caleb Williams was getting hit at an alarming rate, the running game struggled to find any consistent push, and there was no real identity up front. Fast forward to today, and this unit has completely transformed into one of the genuine strengths of this football team. You've got Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson brought in to stabilize the interior. You've got Darnell Wright ascending into legitimate all-pro territory at right tackle. You've got a young left tackle in Ozzie Trapalo who flashed real, legitimate starter-caliber play before his injury and now appears to be recovering ahead of schedule. You've got quality depth in Theo Benedette and a former third-rounder in Kieran Amagaji who's fighting to prove his doubters wrong. And now you've got all of these guys spending their own personal time this offseason training with one of the best left tackles of the last decade, a direct line back to their own position coach's most successful years in this league. That is not an accident. That's a coaching staff and a front office that identified a problem, went out and fixed it through both the draft and free agency, and then built a genuine culture of extra work and accountability on top of that talent. If Trapelo does come back healthy by the middle of the season the way some of these reports are suggesting, this offensive line has a real chance to be one of the better units in the entire NFL. Not just a serviceable group anymore, but a genuine strength that helps carry this team deep into January. That's the story. Faves Nation, a rookie left tackle who tore his patellar tendon in the biggest moment of his young career, now showing real, tangible signs of ahead of schedule progress. A right tackle locking down his long-term future in Chicago off the back of an all-pro season. And a whole group of young offensive linemen putting in extra work this summer with a Hall of Fame caliber mentor because their own position coach made that connection happen. This offensive line has completely transformed, and the recovery timeline on Ozzy Trapelo might end up being the single biggest storyline to watch heading into this Bears season. Now I want to hear from you. Who's your week one left tackle if Trapelo isn't fully ready to go? Braxton Jones, or do you wait for Trapelo no matter what? And how big of a difference does it make for this offense if Trapelo really is back by the middle of the season? Drop it all in the comments. I read every single one. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button right now because we bring you real, honest Chicago Bears coverage every single day. Smash that like button if this update got you fired up about this offensive line. Tag a Bears fan who needs to see this, and I will see you in the next one. This has been Fave, signing off. Faves out.